This week's show brought to you by the Plumleys. I think they're all good, probably, right? I don't know. We'll talk about it on the show. Oh, I am in the past, Brian. Rookie mistake number one. So if you are on Twitch and try and watch yourself, you can actually hear yourself in the past. Although I don't know, is that actually me or is
Gotta
that
mute the
something?
tab.
Yeah. Is this your first time calling a radio show, Dre?
All right, fair enough. Anyway, welcome to the Boxscore Geeks show, where we talk to you both in the present and in the past. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, and this week's show we'll be talking, I don't know, NBA free agency and Pokemon Go. We'll see where it goes. Welcome back, Patrick. You've actually been traveling, been out the last couple of weeks, but Patrick Minton, aka NBA Geek, say hey.
Hey,
All right. And then, as always, we are produced by the, Pokemonist trainer himself, Brian Foster, aka Boxscore Brian. How's it going, Brian?
Yeah, pretty good. I haven't picked a team yet for Pokemon. Maybe, I don't know, Team Discovery Channel with Nelson from The Simpsons. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm very confused. So that's got to be a Lance Armstrong kind of reference, and then a Simpsons reference, but it's
Just
wrapped
straight Simpsons reference, Dre. Old school.
But the Team Discovery team has to be based on like Lance Armstrong back when he was like a huge Tour de France. Or
Oh,
nothing.
you're right. This is pre-Lance Armstrong, actually.
Really? All
Yeah.
right. Well, I'll have to look it up when we're done. Maybe I'll include a link in the show notes. So, as mentioned, we are a basketball show, and we talk basketball a lot. And it's the NBA offseason. And pre-show, Patrick didn't actually sound excited, even though the last couple of weeks we've been discussing a ton of amazing stuff. So I said I was going to hijack the first topic. So, yes, by the way, I'm on the bandwagon. Apologies to anybody else. You can tune out for the first 10 minutes of the show if it's not your cup of tea. But Pokemon Go. Holy cow, who would have believed such a huge thing? And Patrick, you get to be one of the few people that actually has a legitimate excuse for what was going on.
yeah, I was in Germany and then later France, and wasn't even, I wasn't checking email or Twitter, etc. very much either. So the first time I started doing that was when I was kind of in the airport waiting to fly back home, and I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" It was very like I left America in the '90s, took over.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, it is a fantastic example of augmented reality doing well. And I kind of feel this
Yeah,
is Nintendo's MO, which is they're typically late to the party. They show up with something amazing, and if history serves with what they've done in the past, like the Wii as an example, everybody will think it's amazing, and then they'll drop the ball on keeping the lead, which seems to be what Nintendo does
Now,
with
Dre, by saying late to the party, this is their first mobile game, right? Before there was all their own hardware.
well, they're late to the augmented reality part.
well,
That
I
too.
with both,
but
both
but at the
mobile
same
and
time, it's
augmented
like
reality.
I mean, so the concept of what they're doing isn't really new because I mean, way
Yeah.
back with like Layer. I mean, anybody remember Layer?
I don't
Like,
remember
I mean,
Layer. You can inform
um,
me. Yeah.
Layer was this thing you could put on top of Google Maps, and it was like you would basically show like little things about where you are, and you could like tap on icons, and it would like give you info about the shop that you're seeing in your camera and stuff like this. And um, even augmented reality's been around for a while, and what technologically what Pokemon Go is doing isn't really um, amazing new ground, but like all things, I mean, and it's good you mentioned the Wii. They, because being able to do something isn't the same thing as creating the killer app in a new technology, right? I mean,
Well, yeah.
um,
What's someone filled me in on some of the background, which is this is actually even Pokemon Go the game isn't new in the sense of the actual game itself. The company
right,
that made it, I'm dropping the ball like Naya something soft. I'll try and get it up, but they actually made another game that was very
It's
similar.
called Ingress, is the name of the
Yes.
game.
And so the way that worked is people would take photos of landmarks nearby. They would approve them, and then they would, you would get credit for visiting those landmarks. So even that was around, but just adding that, hitting the nostalgia, a bunch of people who are familiar with Pokemon, with that, all of that together works really well. And then the funny thing about the Pokemon concept, which is kind of the cheat, I would argue, Patrick, when you said the killer app is a bunch of people that grew up playing it or even familiar with it kind of have this built-in UI they're familiar with. So when you tell
right.
them you have to go here and check in or you have to catch this thing doing this, it's kind of like everybody knows what to do it. Where a lot of apps, even when they're killer and new, you try and show it to an audience and it's not intuitive what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, so I mean, about 2 years ago, at my company, we came up with what we thought was a killer app for augmented reality, uh, which what it did was it translated signs, but I mean, rather than like, it didn't just show the text to a sign, but it would really show like if, for example, if you put it up at in Disney World, if you shined it on a sign, it wouldn't just translate the sign; it would keep everything in the same font and have the same pictures, etc. The sign would actually look like, oh, hey, I'm in Disneyland Spanish now, or I'm in Disneyland Japanese now, or
Oh,
whatever.
interesting.
It was really cool, but we ran into some technical hurdles, so we never implemented it. And then the other thing is, I mean, it became this kind of thing. Well, how do you get people to use it? And it's like,
Mm.
well, you tell people to install the app, and then when they install the app, you tell them to do this and blah, blah, blah. And it's like this huge hurdle to getting people to actually use it. Whereas here, it's like, okay, so you're using Pokemon Go, and now just turn on your camera and go catch the Pokemons. It's like, oh wow, that's easy. And when people noticed how much fun it was, they shared it with other people and showed them how to do it. And so it all just kind of like the path to adoption was very low.
Well,
No,
yeah,
Oh, go ahead, Dre. Sorry.
I was going to say the interesting thing for me is downtown Appleton. This is an auspicious thing we have on our resume because I
Appleton
guess
is refresh my memory because I went to school in Wisconsin. Appleton is like in the sort of the middle.
if yeah, basically it's if you took Green Bay and Milwaukee, we're like 75% of the way closer to Green Bay than Milwaukee, but about that, yeah.
But
And
so
then,
on the east side then, or
yes, east
okay,
side would be
all right.
correct. Right by the Fox River.
Is
But
there is there a big school in there, or is it just?
oh, by the way, did you go to University of Wisconsin or UW Madison or where'd you go?
I went to UW Eau Claire,
Oh, Claire, interesting.
which
All right.
is since we're on a basketball podcast, I'll bring this up. For a long time, I have no idea if this is still the case. I haven't followed them in 20 years, but for a long time, they were by far, and the coach there was by far the most successful um, um, coach in the, I forget what it's called. It's not the NCAA. So there's a division. And maybe it does belong to the NCAA. I'm not sure, but there's a division where you're not allowed to give any scholarships to your players. So all of your players don't get scholarships, right? And I think what is that called? The NIAIA or something like that. I can't even
It
remember.
used to be called Division Two.
But this guy who coached Eau Claire, he had won like something like 8. He was like the Red Auerbach of that division, right? He was like, he had like 8 championships or something like that. And I think actually during my senior year there, they won the national championship again. And so it was kind of crazy. So when I went to college there, I was, as you all know, I was a bench rider in high school. When I went to college there, I figured, basketball won't be that big of a deal at some crappy ass school, and maybe when I go to pickup games, I won't be like the worst guy on the court. It turns out like I couldn't have picked a worse school because it wasn't all that uncommon for one of the guys who starts in the team to play in the pickup games, and these were guys that like honestly they could have easily played like Division II ball or something like that. They were really good athletes, and a lot of them used like that school as sort of a stepping zone to get it to hopefully getting a scholarship in Division II or something like that. In fact, my roommate at the time, he was the starting point guard of the under 19 Dutch national championship,
Huh.
national team. So he had this really unorthodox like 3-point shot where he almost used 2 hands, but oh my god, he was deadly. He could shoot like 45% from 3, and he was pretty quick too. And so we used to play one-on-one all the time, and he would just kick my ass. I don't think I ever beat him in one-on-one. And he was saying that he actually came to America to that school because of this coach's reputation, thinking he could get on the team, and he got like a red shirt
Wow.
offer. I don't even know what red shirt means in this context because there aren't
Yeah,
scholarships.
yeah.
But he was on the team for a while, and he was just like, man, everybody's like 3 inches bigger than me, but they're still just as fast as me. So I'm screwed.
Go challenge them to one-on-one, Dre.
And by the way, the note, I just looked it up on a map, Patrick. So, yeah, basically, the University of Wisconsin at Clare, or UClair, however you say it, is closer to Minneapolis than it is to Appleton. So, there you go.
That doesn't surprise me.
But what I was going to say about Appleton is we recently made a list called like we're the drunkest city in the United States. So go us. Now I've had some discussions because it's basically based on survey data, and what the conclusion we came to with some of my friends, because obviously data science here, was that just Wisconsin people are more honest because
Interesting.
drinking is very common in the United States, and it's just you come to the Midwest and ask people, "Do you drink?" They're like, "Oh, of course we drink. We drink all the time." And you talk to other people, they don't admit it. But anyway, when I was walking around downtown Appleton, someone made the comment. They said, back in the day, downtown Appleton was filled with all the drunks, and now it's filled with all the Pokemon Go players. Last kind of funny note on that is we have a place called Houdini Square that was kind of they unintended consequence that kind of builds together is because of the landmarks, like we mentioned, it's right by like a museum of art. It's got a bunch of Pokemon stations, Pokemon stops, and Pokemon Gym. Additionally, the people at the Museum of Art decided to install a bunch of chargers for mobile devices. So they inadvertently kind of had the infrastructure built for this game ahead of time. So it's now a
Wow.
very popular place for people to just meet up and play. And it's just an unintended kind of weird thing that happened very naturally. But I found that amusing.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird coincidence of things.
Perfect factor. And I mean, I figure cities in general are kind of, that's the thing. Cities in general, where you've got, libraries and charging stations seem like they're ready built. So that's the other funny thing is this, in terms of killer appiness, it kind of wins because all of this other technology that was getting built for other stuff just kind of perfectly blends with it. So anyway,
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, Jay. I just wanted to say that I think the fact that it's the first smash hit augmented reality software title is the coolest thing about it. And like Patrick was saying earlier, there are a lot of great kind of non-gaming applications for it that I can think. Like, think if you're an architect of a building and you can overlay, what you want the building to look like as it's being built when you're walking through it. Like, there's so many cool things for augmented reality. So I've got this VentureBeat article up here saying that it got $35 million in revenue with 30 million worldwide downloads over the first 2 weeks, and it still hasn't debuted yet in some key territories like Australia and New Zealand. And
I thought it wasn't even out in Europe yet.
it's yeah, I think that's right. And it does. I guess one of the first hits I got when I Googled it today was it debuts in Japan tomorrow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
it's a big juggernaut of a title, and it's even pushed Nintendo stock up above Sony's now. So it's really kind of saved the company. So yeah, it's been a big game.
It seems like this is what Nintendo, it's kind of similar to what Dre was saying. This was what Nintendo does, right? Every once in a while they come up with this amazing thing,
Yeah.
and then they don't really capitalize on it. And then 5 years later, everyone's like, playing Gears of War and whatever. And then all of a sudden, Nintendo's like, oh wait, you forgot about us. Oh, let's release Mario Maker. Boom! Everybody's like, oh my god, Mario Maker, the best thing ever. And then nothing happens for like.
And
2
I have
years.
one last analytics point on it, which was sort of, so it's been one of the biggest news stories of the past few weeks, and there's all these news articles coming out saying Pokemon Go players get robbed while playing the game. Pokemon Go players fall off a cliff trying to catch a Pokemon. And what I'm thinking to myself, I was talking to Dre about this in the pre-show, people do stuff like that all the time, and when, 30 million people are playing this game, of course bad stuff is going to happen to them. So if you really want to make it a stat, are those players, having bad things happen to them more than people who aren't playing? I would doubt. I would tend
Well,
to
yeah,
doubt
I
it.
mean, compare it to like how many people play Angry Birds and do stupid shit, right? Like walking down
Or
the
just
street,
walking down
angry-
the street doing anything. Yeah.
or
so,
texting,
yeah.
texting.
So I'll make sure I link this in the show notes. There's a fantastic Cracked podcast on one of the biggest statistical errors, which you're bringing up, Brian, which is called sampling error. And
There we
just
go,
our
yeah.
inability to know how likely something is. And the best example of this is Florida. So we all assume that the dumbest people in the world live in Florida, and the reality is Florida's laws on essentially the police reports are very open. So every time police report a dumb crime, the media can get it very easily. So there are people that have made careers just living in Florida and scanning over the police blotter every day to go, oh, local man, tries to start grill next to alligator and gets eaten or whatever. And a funny, anecdotal. We're keeping this Wisconsin-based, Patrick. We'll see if that keeps up. There were actually some Bucks moves, so we'll get to keep up more.
Ooh.
I was talking to a friend of mine in town, and he said there's like a house fire every day because he does a lot of contracting work. And I said, really, it's so moist here. How do so many fires start up? He was like, oh, it's not like fire from being dry, which is what I'm used to being from Colorado. He's like, it's fire from people being stupid. He's like, as an example, he's like somebody had an electric motorcycle and they just overloaded the circuit in their garage. So I think most states have stupid stuff. like what you're talking, not even just Pokemon Go, but just in general, have people that do stupid stuff and get injured. And it's only a big deal because of Pokemon Go. You know, the news media isn't going to pick up a story that says local man gets hit in traffic report. But if you think they might have been searching for a Pokemon, then there you go.
Yeah.
All right. So before we go into basketball, last note pre show, Patrick said, I've been out of the loop for weeks. Maybe I'm behind. What I will give you is one of my favorite followers, people that I follow. He follows me as well because that's how awesome he is. He's awesome in every sense of the word. But let me just get it right. It's Oct Onion, I believe. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly. But it's
I just followed him. Actually, no, I didn't. I was gonna just follow him out of your recommendation. So,
so
I hope this.
Yeah. This is what I was going to say. So Christopher Long, aka Oct Onion, he's an analytics guy that does a lot of open source analytics stuff. That's worked with a lot of teams. Really bright, really smart dude. One of the best followers. And the funny thing is, I was saying I would normally, in our normal wheelhouse of sports and statistics and all of this stuff, would tell you to follow him. But he released a bunch of tweets about smart ways to level up, smart ways to play Pokemon Go. So Patrick, if you want to catch up, he's got like a set of 20 tweets that I'll make sure to at least link the starting one in the show notes.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah. So there you go. And he just actually released a GitHub thing with some Pokemon data that I'm going to be interested in.
We've got up on screen right now, Dre. Octonion/Pokemon. There you go on GitHub.
Octonion/Pokemon. So there you go. So if you've got any comments on Pokemon Go, let me know in the comments because I'm very excited. Like I said, I decided to hijack the show when I found out Patrick wasn't on it. Let's talk the off season. Patrick, as mentioned, we've been kind of behind. So if you've got any, I mean, if you want to catch up on Kevin Durant or anything, if you're excited, but you didn't actually sound that interested. I'm curious about this. What
Well,
about
as
this
I said,
offseason
I kind of missed the
you?
beginning, so I missed the start of the craze, and then and actually, as gamers, you may find this interesting. As both gamers and esports fanatics, you may find this interesting. So I was in Germany visiting for friends, and they are big Starcraft II players.
Oh yeah.
So they're like all over me. They're like, "Dude, you got to play StarCraft 2." And I'm like, "Oh man, it would take me forever to catch up." And like,
it's literally the most difficult game in the world.
It is so. I mean, I used to be a very good Warcraft 3. Well, sorry, not very good. I used to be a good Warcraft 3 player. Good to the point of like I could beat almost any adult, but I couldn't beat like the 14-year-olds, right? And so I used to kick their ass in Warcraft all the time, right? And then the skill difference between us was huge, because they would always ask me, "What do you do differently?" And I'm like, "Oh, where do I start? Micro, macro, everything. Like I do everything differently." And so now they've been playing StarCraft 2 for like 3 years, and they're all getting to start it. I'm like, by the time I get even like, okay at this game, it's gonna be like forever, and you guys are gonna kick my ass forever. This isn't going to be fun. But they finally convinced me to download StarCraft 2 and start playing StarCraft 2. So I've been spending like the last, free time I do have the last week just trying to figure out like where do I even start? Like what build orders should I like copy and practice? And because the way it always works with these immensely complex games is like, don't try to like give me the 30,000 foot overview and tell me how everything works. Just give me some simple things to copy and where do I start? Like, what's the current meta game? If I'm playing like Terran, give me 3 simple build orders that I can use versus Zerg versus Terran versus Protoss.
And that was, I remember back in the day with StarCraft, there were some very, like the build order. You build this, then this, then this, then this, then this.
If I'm not mistaken, StarCraft 2 is somewhat less daunting than StarCraft because of the supply order limitations, right?
The supply order limitations are the same, but there's a lot of tools to help you manage your units more, and it's just more user-friendly. So the mechanics are very demanding, but just not quite demanding.
I haven't played very much so far, but so far my impression is that like you have far fewer total units than you did in StarCraft. Like the original StarCraft, you just have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of units.
Well, it's a 200 supply cap for both
right?
games.
Was the old one, and I think StarCraft 2 is like 100 or something.
It's 200 as well.
It's 200, but don't you have like massive penalties after like 1 or 1 or 20 or something like that? And
no, those are only in Warcraft 3. But they the maps are smaller, I think, in some cases. But it depends. It really depends. Is the answer.
So I mean, I'm fairly decent at macro stuff, but I'm terrible at micro. So
never stop building workers.
Yeah, no, I would when I played Warcraft 3, I was I was good at macro, so I would win a lot of. And plus, I was also a random player, which kind of gave me an advantage against some people sometimes. But because generally being a random player is harder than being like if you just specialize in undead or whatever, then you get good at it. But if you're a random player, you essentially get 1/3 the amount of practice with each race. So, but it also gives you these like advantages of kind of exactly knowing, like when you're playing against orcs, you kind of know how they build because you're a random player, so you've played orc a lot too.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm trying to avoid that approach now with StarCraft 2. I'm like, I'm gonna play Terrans and give me something stupid simple to do with Terrans that I can practice, and so I can at least get like the first, if I can get like the first 5 minutes down and do my build orders correctly and everything, then maybe I can sort of maybe not be a complete embarrassment in the 2 versus 2 matches. So anyway, I've been doing that instead of Pokemon Go. And again, I'm like 3 or 4 years late to this party. Well, 5, I guess, if we count 2011. StarCraft 2 is the first one came out, right? I don't know when Legacy.
StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty, that was 2010.
Jeez, 6 years.
Yep.
So actually, while we're
They
on
must
this,
be working on StarCraft 3 now.
well, so it'll be out in 30 years if it's like
Exactly.
Blizzard. But I was going to say, so Brian, this gives another, because again, let's just stick away from basketball for as long as possible. You were really excited about you plugged this last week, Evo 2016.
Oh, that's going to be in my shoutouts at the end, yeah.
But I was going to say, we're on there already. I don't even know. Was there StarCraft at that event?
No, so Evolution is fighting games only. So
only
there
fighting
was,
games, okay.
Yeah, it's the biggest fighting game event of the year. Evo is the nickname, right? And yeah, there's whatever 6 to 8, something like the games they pick, and yeah, it was huge this year. Something like 5,000 people entered Street Fighter V. It's Street Fighter V's first evolution. Smash Melee, which has been around for 16 years or whatever, is still a huge game. Thousands of people entered that. So yeah, it was massive.
Wait,
this
Smash
year.
Melee is
That's the GameCube version.
Yeah, I was going to say. Oh, I remember that. That was huge. I actually
Yeah.
bought that. I bought that day of release. So the first day the GameCube came out, that was one of the first games I bought, if I recall. I could be wrong. I could be misremembering, but I do know I bought it very early because I worked at Target around that time. So as soon as it came out, I knew I had to grab that because the first Smash Brothers was fun as hell. So, but that's impressive. So they didn't do Super Smash Brothers. They just did Melee, or did they do both?
So at a lot of tournaments, like especially Smash only, they'll do all the different Smashes. But at Evolution, where it's cut down and there's only a few games and they vote on it or decide or whatever, Melee is the only one that gets in usually. Well, actually, maybe Smash for Wii U got in there too I think Smash for Wii U got in there which is the brand new one, right? As a lesser game. But Melee is the Cadillac of Smash games. The developers kind of accidentally made it one of the most difficult to play mechanical games ever, up there with StarCraft and whatnot. So, yeah, everyone's just been getting better and better for the past,
16 years.
16 years or whenever it got released, yeah.
Start from birth at this point.
Yeah.
I should never go to like any video game party with you two, right? I'll just get my ass kicked.
Oh, I'm not good at any of these. Like, so
I get the impression
I'm just
that
an
Brian
analyst,
can hold his
Patrick.
own. I get the impression that Brian can hold his own if you.
Hey,
give him a
maybe
controller.
we're talking
If
Street
you
Fighter
put a little
2.
controller in his hand, he can hold his own.
But no, we'll talk more about Evolution in the shout-outs. I'll shout out all the victors, and there's some hype matches.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, as a last note, as mentioned, we've actually used Twitch TV a little for, I guess it's quote-unquote intended purpose this last week because a friend of mine made some Super Mario Maker levels. It was the Major League Baseball All-Star break, so I got some time off. So I was playing Super Mario Maker before Pokemon Go, and a friend of mine made some hard levels, and I have the world's record on a level called Cannibal Yoshi. My friend is an insane person. It's not even his hardest level. But yeah, you can see how crappy my mechanics are because I guess if you watch me on Twitch TV play video games, and I'll tweet it out whenever I do it, listeners.
So I saw the beginning of that. I saw you tweet that. I was at work and I was okay. Let me click on this. And I saw the beginning of that, and I was like, "What? What is the fun in a level that ridiculously hard? Like, is it actually fun to fail that much while figuring out how to do
that? One was fun because you had to figure it, and I enjoyed that because it was a puzzle level, and that's kind of his thinking. And I don't mind puzzle ones as long as, and this is what makes it really hard. There's a fine balance between a puzzle level that you kind of notice something and have to crack it and figure it out, and then it just becoming like impossible. And so, I mean, this is, we've been talking video games at the top of the show, but that was some of the difference between some of the great old video games and some of the terrible ones where you would just go,
Okay, so quick pop quiz, and I feel like this is the way you tell what kind of a gamer a person is.
Okay.
Ghosts and Goblins, great game or terrible game?
I never played the original, so apologies. I'm actually the youngin on the show, which makes me feel odd. I
Well,
did.
yeah, but I mean, it came back in many reincarnations on many
I bought
platforms,
the.
and it
I
was a fucking awful game because it was so hard, and not like hard in the okay, you have to figure out how it is, do it exactly this way, but more in a like, okay, the CPU is just gonna like cheat and stomp on you constantly.
Oh
I have
yeah,
to
because I
say,
was.
shout out to Apology Man and I forget who else it was. They played Firebrand and Arthur from Ghosts and Goblins in Marvel vs. Capcom and Evo last weekend. So some characters that didn't get much love from the accursed Ghosts and Goblins got into
I feel
Evolution.
like Ghosts and Goblins, you just have to follow a very specific pattern. You have to execute it exactly. But you like, in other words, there's no trick to figure out. There's just okay, I have to do this at exactly this point, or I'm gonna die. And then if I do it too early, I'll die. If I do it too late, I'll die. And then you just have to memorize all the patterns, like all the way to the end. It's just like
That's what speedrunning's about. Yeah.
So, but I was going to say that I agree, Patrick, because they're the level I played, Cannibal Yoshi. I'll include it in the show notes.
We're showing it on
I,
stream right now, Dre,
well,
actually.
okay, so sorry to derail again. So I'm not talking about like, for example, you have to in like Pac-Man or Donkey Kong, you have to time things too, in order to get the highest high scores. But what I'm saying is, you had to do that in Ghost Goblins in order to just not fucking die instantly and lose your quarter in 30 seconds. That's the thing I hated. It's like it's not like okay, if you suck then and you don't do it right, you could play for 5 minutes or whatever, and you'll have a little fun, and then you won't get a high score. But if you want to get the high score, you got to do this perfectly and that perfectly and the other thing perfectly. Those are fine games. Ghosts and Goblins was like, no, you got to do everything perfect from the get go, or fuck you, I'll just take your quarter and you can go home, you little crying little bitch. And
You should try out Battletoads, Patrick.
not
That's
fun.
one of the penultimate old school punishing games. But
Yeah,
are we ready
on
for NBA talk?
I was going to say on Ghost and Goblins, I bought like the remake, and it was enjoyable. The one that they released, I think on GameCube. It was enjoyable. But I don't think it was as hard as the original, and I never did end up beating it. So, as a gamer, I guess because you were saying the test, Patrick, because I think I like challenging, but I don't like fucking stupid. And so, the fun of this level is, it's a level that takes, if you do it right, about 55 seconds to beat, which I've done. It's got some stuff you can figure out, and you can figure out every aspect. So that's fine. But yeah, if it was one where like you start the level, you die immediately, and you're like, oh, I have to go left. And if you don't go left every single time you die, I'd have hated it. All right, NBA talk. So yeah, one we were talking about pre-show that's less exciting. So to your point, Patrick, start of the offseason, right? We got Kevin Durant to the Warriors. And now we're going to be discussing that Miles Plumlee got $52 million from the Bucks.
I'm okay with it. I think Miles isn't as good as Mason, right? I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but I feel like Miles is sort of
We've got him
he's
up
the
right
older
now.
but not quite as good brother, right?
I was talking down on this
Right? Or am I
deal
wrong?
initially. No, so you're actually correct, and Dre was too. So he has not been as good for as long as Mason, but he had a good season last year. So this may have been being okay for the Bucks.
I feel like he's been sort of up and down because he was pretty good in
Yeah.
that first year, where Phoenix surprised everybody. And then he wasn't very good the next year. But he never. I mean, I'm always worried about this. But one thing I will say is that if we do our math correctly, right? I hate to use a sort of cliched saying, but 52 million is the new 30 million, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's probably not a fantastic deal, but it's probably not going to break the bank. On the other hand, though. I don't know how much time we have. I'd love to tangent on this because I feel like there was an article on, I think it was 538, but maybe it was Vice Sports. It might have been Vice Sports. Can't remember now. Damn it. It was about how this is a great year to be a mediocre player.
It was 538. Yeah,
Was that
I can bring that
538?
up.
It's a great year to be a mediocre player and a free agent because teams have all this money and every team is thinking, I got to spend it on somebody, which of course is a complete fallacy. You don't have to spend it on somebody. And it's like, I feel like this is sort of one of those central things that separates the good business people from the bad business people. The good business people can recognize when they have a lot of cash in the bank, but there's no good deals, that the smart decision is to just to pass and stay put.
Well, the
Or
funny
stay
thing
at pat.
too,
And
there's
the-
a
and the-
funny,
yeah.
weird adversarial part of that, Patrick, because you're like, the funny thing is that they have to spend the money according to the CBA. But the way the CBA works is if they are below the floor, which I believe is 80% of the cap,
90
then they
now.
is it 90? Okay, so 90% of the cap, then they basically just give everybody on their team a raise.
Right.
So yeah, a mediocre team could say there aren't any good deals. congratulations, all the players that are loyal to us. You get a raise. But I do feel that the NBA
Well,
owners have an adversarial thing where they're like, no, we don't want to do that. We got to spend it. We got to get a future.
but then there's also the fact of there's the fact that options have value, right? So you could stay $20 million under that salary floor, and I guess if you never spend it, then you have to give it to your players. On the other hand, somebody might come knocking in like January or March and say, "Hey, Carmelo Anthony is really not worth $27 million. I'd really love to unload this contract, and I'll throw in 2 first-round picks." And you're like, okay, and suddenly, boom, you've basically capitalized on the fact that you, in contrast to all the other idiots, didn't spend all your money in a seller's market. Right. I mean, and I guess if we're saying seller in terms of free agent, like this market is the free agents market, right? Like it's not the owner's market, it's the free agents market.
So I mostly agree, but there are still some really undervalued contracts getting signed. Like even your Timberwolves
Sure.
got Jordan Hill for $4 million a year. Like some
That's what
team
I'm talking about,
could
though.
have paid
Like,
more, right? And gotten him.
Yeah, but why are you spending $140 million on DeMar DeRozan when you can spend $8 million on Jordan Hill? Right? I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like I mean, just because you have the money, you don't have to spend it all. And I do feel like so far, I've more or less approved of the decisions that the Timberwolves have made. None of them have been big decisions, but so far I've been like, okay, that's a good one.
That
That's
was
a
what's
good
funny is I considered all of that when I was watching that, Patrick. I was like, the Wolves are winning free agency just by not spending money because all these
right by not
it-
getting guys like DeMar DeRozan or whatever, right? So,
And not trading Ricky Rubio apparently is the news today. They'll keep him.
well, is it the news today? Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, I personally, I mean, I think the way all three of us would think is that Dunn looks like a pretty competent player. He might become
Yeah.
a pretty NBA player. On the other hand, we probably all agree that if he follows the law of averages, it's probably going to be like his third year before he's really worth anything, right? So why the hell wouldn't I keep Rubio on this great contract for those years until Dunn is that good? I mean, it doesn't really make any sense to get rid of Rubio. It makes perfect sense to keep Dunn as the backup to Rubio.
there's
Unless-
like there's a good headline pun in there, Patrick. So what you're saying is the Timberwolves should keep Ricky Rubio. Oh wait, okay, let's see. I got this. I got this. I'm
while you're
sorry to
thinking
get
about this,
Okay, keep going.
the point is that like if in 3 years Dunn turns out to be so good that you're like, oh my god, who do I give the starters minutes to? Then you're in a fantastic scenario that you're like, okay, I'd love to have that problem, right? But you're not likely to have that problem right away. And even if you do, if by some fantastic miracle Dunn turns out to be the next Chris Paul and he's like amazing from the get-go as a rookie. Very unlikely, but let's just assume, well, oh, somehow it happens. Okay, that's a problem I'd love to have. And then you can shop Rubio. There's just no reason to shop Rubio now. None whatsoever.
And I mean, even still, you could pay him instead of Levine or someone like that, right? I mean, the Warriors play Livingston and Curry together all the time, and that's a great combination. Like,
Right.
you can,
I'm getting the impression that both Levine and
Wiggins.
thank you, are both not like I get the impression that Thibodeau isn't falling for the standard meme that, oh, those two are amazing, you have to play them 25-30 minutes. It's like,
Do you
well,
think there's any
I don't
value
really.
in the fact that Thibodeau's kind of newish there? Because I think one problem with players like Carmelo Anthony in Denver was a great example of when kind of a franchise builds itself around someone and the management is like, this is our guy. You wrote the great article that I think is the most referenced one by me, the Kevin Love sunk cost fallacy article that I talk about all the time.
The Picasso, right?
Yeah. Well, no, that's a different one.
Oh,
The
damn.
Patrick's basically talked about how teams get, just too invested in players and can't let a bad deal go. I wonder sometimes if there's value to a new GM-ish person because they're not as attached to the decision because they didn't make that decision.
Yeah, I think it's much easier for him as the guy who did not draft either of them to just come in and say, well, okay, yeah, I'm sure, Flip thought you were sliced bread or whatever, but I'm not Flip, so you're gonna have to start over with me. I think it gives him sort of an advantage. But on the other hand, I mean, especially for most GMs, I just feel like just stop and think about who's the boss here. I mean, do you really have to hang on to that guy you drafted, or can you pretend that you're the boss and and make a different decision? I mean, it's up to you. And I feel like the GM, so the GMs that are just trying to cling to their jobs and kind of like justify the prior bad decisions that they made, the Colangelos and the Ed Kings of this world, um, they don't. I mean, they wait. Billy King, sorry, I got Billy King and Ed Stefanski mixed up there in my head. So those people, they never become like the guys who graduate into the upper echelon and who we revere, sort of, like we do with San Antonio um, or or help me out here, guys. There aren't really a lot of other
San
organizations
Antonio's
like
kind of
San
it at
Antonio,
this
are
point. I
there?
mean,
I mean, I
even
feel like maybe Bob Meyer might get there if things keep going, but on the other hand, it kind of helps when the MVP just wants to play for your
I
team.
feel like the Warriors track, and we've talked this a lot on the show, is kind of like they kind of have like a 50-50. They're a weird quantum like front office where they have some good ideas and some bad ideas, and they kind of roll the dice and fate decides which one they go with. So that's why back in the day they went with Kwame Brown, but recently, Andre Iguodala and Kevin Durant deciding to play for him, that has been the difference.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's sorry, it's always going to be very easy to be a great GM when you're GMing the champion, right? Because when you're GMing the champion, everyone wants to play with you, and so your job really amounts to, okay, of all the many people that want to play for me, let me pick the ones that actually know how to play basketball and take them, and let me say no to the ones that don't know how to play basketball.
So,
As
Dre,
opposed to like you're
oh,
GMing the Minnesota Timberwolves and fucking no one wants to play for you. Your job is a lot harder.
Dre, I'll defend the Warriors a little bit here because I'm the first to jump on them, but I pointed this out last time too, but it's really based on rumors, right? So the results of their moves have turned out really good, or really well, I should say. However, we hear about all these bad moves that they could have maybe done or should have done but didn't. But we aren't really sure if they're rumors or not, right? Like what we were talking about for this offseason was the Warriors were rumored to either be giving max to Kevin Durant or giving a max to Harrison Barnes. And you're like, well, one of those is not like the other, right? And the one that they wanted happened to work out. So we don't know if that's true. Maybe they wouldn't have maxed Barnes if Durant didn't get signed.
Like, would they have?
We just don't
Barnes?
know.
Which would have been a terrible decision, right?
Terrible.
Would they have, because the courageous and right decision would have been to just say no to Barnes and just let him walk. If
By the way,
Durant hadn't come by, right?
This is the one free agency that would have made sense, Patrick, because there are times where you could, for instance, you could defend re-signing DeRozan, kind of, if the argument you had was, well, the way the NBA works is we have this salary cap, and once you go over that cap, you're not allowed to sign new people. So once you go over that cap, the only way to acquire big names is via trade. And I'm going to re-sign DeRozan for more than $10 million a year because I need a contract with trade value to get another player. But because every single team got $20 million extra in the bank, and essentially, if you let one of your max players go, you've got at minimum 10 to 20 million to spend on new players. This was the one off season where no team, that includes the Raptors, we keep bashing DeRozan, no team was justified in re-signing an overpaid star.
Yeah.
Because you basically got the bankroll, you got the cap space and bankroll to go target better people. Whereas other off seasons, that may not be the case.
Yeah.
So, hey, speaking of, Joe Lacob and the Warriors and how light years ahead they are, do we want to rate this Miles Plumlee deal?
So have you been watching this, Patrick?
Patrick, let me explain.
Yeah.
Here's my rating scale for the free agents. And it's similar to hotels or a movie. It's 1 to 4 stars, except if you don't like the deal, if you think it's bad, it's 1 to 4 crying Jordans. If you like the deal, it is 1 to 4 light years for Joe Lacob being light years ahead. So I think we like the Plumlee deal, right? How many light years do we want to give it? 1 to 4.
2.
Okay, wait. Can I advocate the that thing you like scale?
Oh, I don't know. We've already got the graphics up and everything. This
I feel like
system
that
is
thing
in
you
place.
like scale, which essentially boils down to what are the three? I think there's three ratings. There's shit plus, and then there's good, right?
There's also they do shit and good with plus and minus.
We're not aiming for good ratings here, though.
Shit minus shit plus. good minus good and good plus. Is
The
that
goal of this rating scale is dank memes, not to actually rate things properly.
So let's just
All right, okay. I'll
confuse
stick
the
to the
listener
crying
with
Jordans,
dates.
the crying Jordans, and the light years.
Yeah.
I'll give it. I'm torn between four. Wait, so is four crying Jordans or one crying Jordans worse?
No, so if you like the deal, you don't give it Jordans. Four is the worst.
Right, but what if
Four
I
is the
still
worst.
kind of don't like it, but not very much? Is that like one crying Jordan?
That's one crying Jordan.
Okay, so I'm torn between one crying Jordan and one Lightyear.
That's a very
Because
neutral deal.
I neither like nor dislike.
Dre complained about this too. He wanted to have a meh, like a neutral, but no,
I feel like
there's
there
no
needs to
fence
be-
sitting on this show.
I feel like there needs to be a you know what I'd like to christen this. I feel like there needs to be a Keith Atkins.
Keith Atkins,
Guys,
interesting.
guys remember Keith Atkins? He was like, I think he was like a 6-year veteran of the Chicago Bulls who had won 62 games, and then they let him go. Like he started like almost all their games, and then they let him go, and then they signed Rip Hamilton for him instead. And it's not like like no one was saying Keith Atkins is the shit, but at least people I think in the Wages Wins community were saying, well, Keith Atkins was average, and he started all the games for the Chicago Bulls, and by the way, Rip Hamilton is terrible, so you should have just kept Keith Atkins. So I feel like Keith Atkins represents this good thing where like, well, you know, whatever. It's like he's neither good nor bad, but he's better than playing a bad player. You know what I mean?
I don't know if he's the
Is this a
ideal
bad
player
metaphor?
for that. Yeah, I mean, I get the metaphor. I don't know if he's the ideal player for it.
Okay, then think of a better player for this. But in the meantime, if you're going to force me to go one way or the other, I will give it one Lightyear.
Fair. And
No.
you, Dre, you say two, huh?
I say, yeah. I think I'm in the same boat where I'm a little torn. I think I'm a little more optimistic than Patrick, but he's an above-average player. The one thing that has really weirded me out this offseason, and that article that you were referencing, Patrick, is 100% right, is the number of players that have either not proven themselves in production or haven't proven themselves in minutes getting these 4-year deals. And so that's if Miles Plumlee had gotten a 2 to 3 year deal, I'd probably be a little more on board. What, Brian? I think you had his stats up or have them readily. And I
Yeah,
can
let's
get to
bring
that
it back
in a
up.
second.
No,
But-
he had a great year last year, a career year, but it was only in
No, well,
870
didn't.
minutes.
I disagree. If you call that a career
Oh.
year, that's a horrible career.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, no, because I mean
he was
I mean,
great per minute, is all I'm trying to say.
He got 870 minutes, and that's another deal that you wanted to discuss. We can kind of move on to this. Was Mike Miller re-signed with the Nuggets, and I basically said I don't know what it's going to be. I think it's probably only one because it's probably not that expensive. That's probably a crying Jordan one. But if you look at Miles Plumlee's career, he has never cracked 2,000 minutes. The closest he got was in 2013, 2014 with Phoenix. His rookie season, kind of, because the previous year only played 54 minutes. I don't know the rules in the NBA, so I don't know. Maybe 54 is enough to mean he's not a rookie. But to your point, Patrick, right? 2013, 2014 Phoenix, Miles Plumlee, showed a lot of promise, but it was only 1,200 minutes the season after it and 800 next. So they've given a 4-year deal to a player that has never played over 2,000 minutes in NBA season. And that's kind of weird. It was the same with Timothy Mozgov. Why are you giving an older player this long deal? So this offseason is fantastic for these kind of mediocre players, not just in the amount they're getting, but the length they're getting, because teams are just, are you telling me Miles Plumlee wouldn't have signed 3 years at 36 million? Like, why did they give him that fourth?
I don't know. Maybe he was getting 4-year offers from other teams. I don't know.
And I mean, even if they are offering 4-year deals, right? Then it's to your point, Patrick, right? If I offer a guy a deal that I consider a good deal for myself, and they go, well, we're getting these better offers, the question you have to ask yourself is, well, am I willing to match that better offer, or is that just out there? And I think when you're tying up 4 years into a player that's going to require a trade, a waive, or them improving, I get a little more trepidatious. And teams seem to just not give a damn about the future right now, which is very interesting.
Yeah, speaking of the future, I mean, how confident are we that there will be a lockout?
Oh, 100%. Are you kidding me? If the owners would be at this point, right? So the last lockout, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, commenters or Brian or Patrick, I believe the old deal was 57%. There was a 57% split on things that qualified as NBA revenue, players to teams. So for those of you that don't understand, there's this big pile of money that the NBA collects. called basketball revenue. You can go check Larry Kuhn's CBA for what falls under it. The NBA cuts it. 43% goes to the owners, 57% goes to the players, and that's what dictates players' salary. So when a player is getting, quote, overpaid, what you need to keep in mind is that's coming out of a pile of money that the NBA has earned, which is why at the end of the season, there are sometimes updates and adjustments. So, for instance, this last season, the NBA actually paid out money to the players because they underestimated how much money they were going to make at the start of the season. And additionally, they tend to give themselves some wiggle room, so they usually overestimate how good they're going to do, so they don't usually ask for money back. So that's the full scenario. So they gained in the last NBA lockout, they went from 57% to 50%. Now, if you think about the last couple of years in the NBA and just the growth that it has seen, and the fact that these teams are selling for so much money, I forget how much the Bucks sold for, but it was absurd. The NBA owners got a 7% change, which, by the way, to them, right, they basically went from 43% to 50%. So that's what, 7 divided by 43? What is that? Somebody smarter than me?
It's a lot of money.
That's 16. That's 16%. The owners got a 16% raise right when the NBA started getting better. So why wouldn't they try for a raise again in this lockout? Why wouldn't they try for more favorable conditions?
Because it could backfire. They could end up, they could end up with worse.
Ooh, interesting.
Right?
Michelle Roberts seems to be more competent than Billy Hunter also. She seems like she knows what she's doing.
She seems way more competent. Like, I feel like Billy Hunter was a dude that was easily played.
And by the way, these are the former and current union reps for the NBA. It used to be Billy Hunter. Now it's Michelle Roberts. Yeah.
And she has made some very strong comments.
Yeah.
Billy Hunter was the classic guy who didn't have a fucking clue how to do his job. He only got it because of connections, and he was easily manipulated. I don't think that... sorry, what was her name again? Michelle
Roberts, yeah.
Michelle Roberts. I don't think she is in that category at all. She strikes me as a very competent woman who's not going to be
just based on her statements. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, for one thing, she seems to understand. She seems to understand quite well that it's a game played in the media, and she seems to know pretty well how to manipulate the story in the media. And so, I know I'm not saying that if the NBA owners locked out, I'm not saying it's likely that they would end up with a deal worse than 50%, but I'm saying it's definitely a non-zero chance, right? There's definitely an expected value equation that somebody has to do the math on.
Yeah, well, yeah, the players will have that, right? Let's say the owners lock them out, and Michelle Roberts and LeBron and whoever else is going to go straight to the media and say, you guys got a 7% raise last time and you want more? That's what I would do.
And
plus,
like I
mean,
said,
you're looking at the revenue,
16.2% raise, because you have to look at compared to what they were getting.
Yeah, see, I already forgot.
Like, so what happens if they lock out and the players say, fine, you're locking out, we want 52, right? I mean, and again, bear in mind, I'm pretty sure they don't get any of this ridiculous TV money unless the games happen, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what their contract deals are, because that would be what would be fascinating to your point there, Patrick, is something that the players don't seem to be good at, and not the players, the Players Association as a whole when they're negotiating. I don't think they're that fantastic at kind of reading the fine print, or at least haven't been in the past. And as you mentioned, Billy Hunter didn't seem very competent, and I believe Michelle Roberts is a lawyer, unless I'm mistaken.
She is.
So if there is some,
she's a very good lawyer for a very prestigious law firm.
Apologies, Michelle Roberts, for clearly not being as read up on you, because if you listen to this show, I'm showing my ignorance. I think I've read a few articles in the comments, but so very good lawyer. And so if there is some deal in the TV deal, if there's some clause in the TV deal that says, a minimum of 42 games have to be played in the NBA season, or else, you don't get the revenue for that thing. It's entirely possible that the players, instead of before where, the clock kept running and they basically freaked out, where in this case, the clock keeps running and they go, if we wait 10 more games, and I'm not saying this is the case, but I'm saying a smart person reading the contract may be able to find something that the players can actually use correctly, which they have not shown a propensity to do in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I have no.
That's good.
It's good. Great rebuttal.
it's good when we actually finish up a topic, because one of our things is we go forever. And I'm going to take a look at my clock real quick to see when I tweeted out, because I would actually like to try and keep us about an hour, because that also, listener, some behind the scenes stuff. I do really like writing up notes for the shows. and putting up a good post. And the longer we go than an hour, the longer I have to do. And I don't know if you've noticed, this is a good thing. I love this about the Boxer Geek show. All of our hosts are very knowledgeable and have a lot of fantastic tangent subjects, which means, I'm going to have to look up the coach at Eclair that you mentioned, Patrick. So the longer we go, there's just the more likelihood that we're going to bring up some tangent that's going to require me to, spend 5-10 minutes Googling. So I'm going to try and keep us at an hour, so it's good if a topic finishes up. The other free agent name that, I can see why you're not excited, Patrick, that I briefly mentioned was Mike Miller. I think I give him one crying Jordan, Brian, on your scale. So the Nuggets re-signed Mike Miller. The reason I'm giving him a crying Jordan is because he's below average, and not only that, he just has not seen the court. He was once a fantastic player, and really liked him, but he's just had injury concerns his entire career. So I have to give him a crying Jordan deal because he's below average. It's only 2 years, $5 million, so I'm okay saying it. It's not a harmful deal. Maybe he's a good presence in the locker room. Maybe he's a good coach. But I'm just never a fan of spending your money on below average players.
Well, he's 36 years old, so yeah, that's all I can say.
Sorry, this is Mike Miller we're talking about?
Yeah, Mike Miller.
I'll give it one light year.
I'm tempted to give it a light year as well, but I'll defer to Dre since it's his Nuggets and go with the crying Jordan.
I mean, yeah, I get it. Totally understand the concerns, and they're totally valid. But 3-point shooting is one of those things subject to a lot of variance. So you can look like a below average player for a year if you don't shoot well. But I mean, history definitely says that he can shoot the three.
But I mean, my point there, Patrick, is just more, the age and injury. It's like because he's so far away from seeing the court for significant minutes, because he's so old and beat up. It's just, one of those. It's always fascinating to me to watch NBA teams and go, when you spend minutes and roster spots and money on players, you're giving up on other alternatives. And we're always kind of the opinion that there are players, you can't guarantee they'll be good, but there are undrafted players that look like they have a lot of potential. There are players overseas that look like they have a lot of potential. There are, free agent names that are getting signed for nothing that look like they have a lot of potential. And the keyword I would use is upside. And there's no upside on Mike Miller. In the best case scenario, Mike Miller comes back and plays at his 2013-2014 level in minutes, which was 1,700 minutes, 0.157 wins per 48, which is very good for that contract, but that's his upside. That's his absolute peak. Whereas I'm arguing there have to be some undrafted players that, were high on our list that have an upside of being, a Ben Wallace star.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad that, it seems like we keep finishing up topics. Patrick, I'm assuming you won't care at all about this subject, but we got to throw it out there. So we're going to wind down on the last couple of subjects that Brian has put up on the script. Basically, the WWE has a big concussion protocol or concussion lawsuit going against it.
Yeah, we'll give this 4 crying Jordans. No, just kidding. Go ahead, Trey.
All right, that has some big names on it, and the only real interesting part about this is that there is a lot of conflict of interest with the WWE and concussions right now. One of the biggest names in concussion research is Chris Nowinski, who I've actually met, and he worked with Bennett Omalu, who was the subject of the movie Concussion. And his organization basically gets a ton of its funding from the WWE. And the WWE, much like the NFL, has a bunch of money invested in concussion research. And now a bunch of former WWE talent is suing the WWE. And what kind of is interesting is, a lot of WWE people, it seems like they're averse to smashing the product because a lot of their livelihood is still built up in them. Even former people, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Chris Jericho are two names that do podcasts, are still very popular. Mick Foley, as an example, still get money because they are involved with the WWE. So I'll be fascinated to see how this plays out.
You're right. I don't care.
Called it ahead of time. I guess this is from Brian. I haven't even read the article that you sent here. So, Brian, if you have any subjects, and we'll see. Let's predict ahead of time. I predict Patrick will care marginally and then just say something pithy. Brian, you may have a different argument. Roger Goodell is trying to get NFL players to stop from appearing on HBO's Balling, which
he tried and failed.
And I believe that show actually has, isn't The Rock on that show?
Yes, he is.
All right. So there you go. It all comes back to wrestling. Patrick, any concerns on that?
On wrestling?
On Roger Goodell stopping NFL, trying to stop NFL players from being on HBO's Ballers.
My note for this is, just before you go, Patrick, is we were just talking about how the NBA CBA negotiation is going to go. The NFL players have done far worse than I'd say the NBA or any of the other leagues over the years. They don't have guaranteed contracts. They don't have anything. They have very short careers. And this is just an example of, the NFL saying, not only are we going to screw you over on the CBA negotiation, now for these other things like appearing in TV shows, it's outside of the NFL. We're going to try to interfere in that and screw you there too. So that's just typical NFL to me. That's why I brought up this article.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all
I
there
got
is
nothing
to
to
it.
say.
Yeah.
All right. This one's actually kind of interesting. I'd be curious your opinion from a coaching perspective. And I didn't read up into it hugely, but I know the NBA changed the Hack-a-Shack rules, and I believe it's the end of the quarters now that's the same. To read
they're
it,
2 minutes in every quarter instead of just the last quarter, right?
and what's the official? I can read it out. The current rule for away from the play fouls is only applicable in the last 2 minutes right now of the game. Let's see. So what they're basically assessing flagrant for off the ball fouls now in the last 2 minutes of the quarter and the last 2 minutes of the game. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah, I've got what you're reading off up on screen here. Yep. It will be extended to the last 2 minutes of each period.
And so do you, obviously Hack-a-Shack, especially with players like Drummond, DeAndre Jordan has been a huge deal lately, Patrick. Do you think this change will have many major changes in the game next season? And I know Mark Cuban apparently is not a fan.
Yeah, I mean, I think they, if they want to stop this, then they should just adopt international rules, right?
Yeah.
And just make every. So I think the international rules is still like whether or not a foul is intentional off the ball is still the referee's discretion, right?
Believe so.
Just implement a rule like that. So any intentional foul is automatically two in the ball. Boom, over, end. You will see maybe like one intentional foul throughout the course of a season, if that's really what you're trying to do, right?
And yeah, I mean, what the only purpose then for intentional fouling wouldn't be the like Hack-a-Shack purpose. It would be more for like clock stoppage, right?
Yeah. Well, and even then, like in FIBA ball, you got to be careful because if it looks like an actual intentional foul, it's not going to achieve that purpose because the other team's just going to get the ball back.
Yeah.
So you have to know how to look like you're stealing it, but still foul, sort of, in FIBA. That's interesting. But I kind of like it. That could make sense.
In general, like, if I mean, either you care about this or you don't. Like, either you.
I honestly
don't want this
don't
to
at
be
all.
part of the game. No, I mean, for the NBA's perspective, like, either you don't want this to be part of the game, or you do, right? And if you don't want it to be part of the game, then fucking put an end to it, right? And make every foul off the ball, every defensive foul off the ball, turn it into a situation where if you don't want to be extreme about it, then turn it into a situation where the team can always choose whether they want to take the ball out of bounds or shoot free throws, right?
So with that being said, then this makes it feel like this rule that came up was sort of a political compromise. There's guys like Mark Cuban who are like, no way we should be able to hack. And then there's other teams, I'm assuming, the Clippers and the Pistons, who have guys that don't want to get fouled all the time, are probably like, no way we need to do this. So maybe this is like the halfway compromise.
This is one of those things that drives me nuts when owners act according to the current makeup of their team instead of according to what makes sense for the league.
I'm just guessing.
The problem with Hack-a-Shack has fuck all to do with who wins and who loses. That is not a problem. Nobody cares who wins and who loses over the long run. The problem with Hack-a-Shack is that fans get bored as fuck watching games where it happens. It's not about the problem with it is not that teams want the Clippers to win. It's not because people want, DeAndre Jordan to be better. It's because people don't want to watch DeAndre Jordan shoot free throws. So if you're making this as an owner, if you're making this rules decision because DeAndre Jordan doesn't play for you right now, because you're like, oh, well, I'll win more if this rule stays the way it is, then you're a fucking idiot, because as an owner, you should be acting in the sense of what's the best for my product. Your product is the game, is the fans' enjoyment of the game. That is the product. Whether or not you win or lose doesn't have a fucking thing to do with that. And if you're making your decisions based on whether your team will win and lose, as an outcome of this particular rule set, you frankly don't deserve to be an owner. That's just crazy.
I mean, we talked that last week, and that's an article I brought up years ago about a lot of the changes to basically player movement. So the owners this offseason complaining about Kevin Durant's situation. Well, the reality is they set up those rules. When Kevin Garnett got that max deal from Minnesota, and the owners said this is unacceptable, we're not allowing players. We've got to do a max contract now for players. That's what set up the future. And again, the owners weren't acting in what's best for the league or what's best for the players. They basically all said, all of us wanted Kevin Garnett. We didn't get him. That's not fair. So to your point here, if any owner is going, we want hack-a-shack rules to change so that we can exploit the Warriors, or not the Warriors. Although I guess DeAndre Jordan, Andre Iguodala isn't great at fouls. I don't know DeAndre Jordan's, or not DeAndre Jordan, Draymond Green. Obviously, I was thinking DeAndre Jordan with the Clippers. If they're thinking we can exploit the Clippers or the Pistons, they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got one more kind of businessy thing, I guess.
One more topic. This seems just pretty reasonable. The Warriors want advertisers to pay $20 million for the jersey patch. Patches were finally approved. I think the first deal was StubHub with the 76ers. I mean, I just did some quick back of the napkin math. If those patches are on for, I don't know, are there rules about home or away, or is it just
not
every
sure,
game?
not sure.
Because if the patches are on there every single game, then that's basically $250,000 a game to advertise. Because I guess, do you know the team that's asking? I'm looking at the article you mentioned from ESPN.com.
Yeah, so it's the Warriors asking for 15 to 20 million for their rights to put the patch on, supposedly. And then you're right, the 76ers before got StubHub on there for between 5 to 6 million, I want to say. So that's like 3 or 4 times more than the Sixers. Kind of interesting.
Well, I'm just saying it's $250,000 a game, which I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd have to talk to an advertising firm. I'm obviously not my level of expertise, but it doesn't seem unreasonable.
Yeah, teams will start to get these at some point, and we'll see how it goes. I don't know. What would be a good match for the Warriors to pay that much? Maybe the Pokemon Go patch on the Warriors jersey. Now that Nintendo can afford it, I don't know.
That seems like wasted money. It seems like if you're watching that, you're already.
$20 million is a lot of money. I feel like your
for 1 year.
So let's assume that having that patch increases your revenue by a small percentage. Well, how big does your revenue stream have to be then to break even on 20 million?
Yeah, I guess that's true. So
I mean, how big does your revenue stream now have to be for a percentage increase to be worth 20 million?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I don't. Yeah, again, I didn't know. I mean
either you're like a nobody and 20 million will increase your revenue by 20 million, or you're a huge conglomerate and 20 million amounts to a few fractions of a percentage and it's worth it. I mean, I feel like for some random company, let's pick, for example, Blizzard, whose revenue streams are big, but probably not in the billions. Maybe it is in the billions. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm underestimating how much money Overwatch makes.
Yeah, they got bought by Activision and then bought by Vivendi, then sold. So it's been complicated for Blizzard corporately the last few years.
Sure, but like, how much money did they get sold for?
I think they bought themselves away from Vivendi.
For...
No, I can't. I don't have it up right now.
Right, because I mean,
but it was a lot.
I'm guessing their market cap is like what, 4 or 5 billion.
It's not their style though. They wouldn't pay 20 million a year.
Right. I mean, anyway, it boils down to what I'm saying. Either 20 million is the amount of money that catapults you into the big time, or 20 million is enough for a small percentage increase on your massive revenue. And so it works out that way. I mean, it's a lot of money, and it's hard to understand for whom that money would be well spent.
What I'd say is
I guess it's for let's call them a Fortune 2000 company, probably not worth it as opposed to a Fortune 500 company.
I'd say it's some company with international reach where they're trying to move into new international markets, like, I don't know, India or China, where the NBA games go, but maybe they don't have a foothold there yet. So, yeah, more of like a Coca-Cola, Pepsi kind of thing. I mean, that's bad examples because those are already in these markets, but you know what I mean.
Well, I guess that's the thing. It's one of those big conglomerates that just wants more ubiquity, right? Like being on more jerseys, like Nike or whatever. Which, by the way, so Nike has its own deal with the jerseys, right? So, I mean, separate from
did
thing
you
like a
see
patch.
this got interesting too with Nike. Sorry, slight tangent. That appears to be some of the show, but I guess the classic conspiracy theory Olympic photo where the only non-Nike holders in the photos had their patches covered up with clever positioning of players.
That's making your money right there.
Yeah, so I'm
Is it
curious.
too late to talk about Cristiano Ronaldo?
Oh, yeah, I've got no. I threw
Did you guys
like
see the thing where so he plays for Real Madrid and some TV station in Barcelona, the home of FC Barcelona, Real Madrid's biggest rival, they showed a picture of him after the European Cup and they had his abs photoshopped to look flabbier. And their justification, they said they were just trying to Photoshop off sponsorships like the Adidas logo on his jersey and stuff. Which of course leaves everyone scratching their head because like I don't think there are any sponsorships on his abs.
Well, they kind of removed his belly button too. That's a funny photo.
Well, it was just I mean, it's obviously a terrible Photoshop job, but because it suddenly made his very well defined abs be very blurry. It made his belly button disappear. Sorry, I just thought that was funny. I didn't mean to do
I'm
that.
gonna have to look. I'm assuming I'm gonna chuckle about that when I get back to it. All right, so
I know
I think.
you guys don't watch any soccer. You don't care.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, like I also have to say, is like we threw like 4 subjects. I was like, Patrick, do you care about this? She's like, no, not really, not really. So clearly, but yeah, I think from my personality and love of sports, I think there is a tipping point with soccer that is very close where I'm just going to start being interested. And basically, it's my Twitter feed where, enough of my Twitter feed talks about soccer stuff. And I know it has to be the same as any other subjects that I find myself talking about. Wrestling is a good example, Patrick, where I think a lot of followers that you and I both follow, myself included, talk about wrestling, and there've got to be times like, what is going on? Why is everybody talking about the draft going on right now, which is happening on Raw, I guess, or SmackDown as we speak. I'm not watching. I don't care. But yeah, to your point, Patrick, yeah, so, there'll be a point where I care about soccer, but currently, not really.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Missed some good matches lately.
Patrick, because Brian's got a ton, and I think I already have one that I've already said. Do you have any shout-outs to end the show out on?
My only shout out is kind of lame because it's to a corporation. But
Sell out. No,
I'd like to shout out to Vice Sports, which, as you guys know, is David Barry writes an occasional column for them. But I've been reading a lot of their stuff, like the people not named David Barry write, and it's really good stuff. There's really good sports.
Oh yeah.
Reporting.
Their editor Patrick
everything.
Ruby is great. He's
It's
a
kind of
fantastic.
everything that ESPN is not, right? Just like it's totally willing to like call out sexism and racism and things like that, and also even handed across all sports. The WNBA gets pretty good coverage and stuff like that. So it's become my go-to like sports reading. Even though it covers a lot of sports I don't care about, like boxing or UFC or whatever, but it's still like just all around really great writing when it comes to the things I do care about.
Well, that's a pretty good. I mean, I've got no complaints about that as an endorsement. I like the editor. I've liked Dave Barry, and yeah, I think
We should contact them. Maybe they'll sponsor us.
Oh yeah, dude, I'll wear a patch every show.
You guys have to turn your video cameras on if we're sponsored.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
had
I
a
got
few
no
weeks
problem.
without video. Don't worry, we'll
No,
get
it's
back.
okay.
All right, so my only shout out, Brian, who I already mentioned, was Octonion, aka Christopher Long. Great follow for everything that we talk about on the show in general, sports, statistics. But as I mentioned, he gets the extra push this week is Pokemon Go. So there you go. That's my shout out.
All right, so yeah, I've got all these Evo shout-outs, and we talked about games a little bit earlier, so I'll try to go through them pretty quickly here. But yeah, it went down this weekend, and it was hype as usual. They had the this year that was new is they had the final Sunday at the Mandalay Bay Event Center, which is what I know is the place where they have the UFC fights. So it was that kind of atmosphere, and we've got some pictures here on stream, and yeah, they pulled in over 200,000 concurrent viewers on ESPN2 and also 150 on Twitch simultaneously. So they did pretty well in viewership, and just some of the games were great too. In Mortal Kombat, Sonic Fox was the expected winner, and he did take it in the end. He was dominant throughout. He didn't lose until the grand finals, where he was lost and sent to the losers bracket, but he switched up to Alien, went in there and took it. Marvel vs. Capcom 3, a favorite of American gamers, of course. We love MVC3. NYC Chris G took his first EVO title. He's been considered the best Marvel player in the world several different times in the past, so he solidified his legacy by getting his first EVO title. He made a run through the losers bracket and beat last year's Evo champion Cane Blue River from Chile, I believe. Interesting, one of the few non-Americans that's good at it, and beat him twice in a row in the grand finals to take it. Good job, Chris G. Smash Melee, it was Liquid Hungry Box from Florida. Also went through the losers bracket with the lame Jigglypuff character that all the fans hate. He went through a murderer's row of all the other Smash gods. He's considered one of the gods himself. He beat Sweden's Armada twice in a row in the grand finals. And it went down to the final stock, and it was a pretty epic match. So check that out if you like Smash and didn't watch it for whatever reason. And, of course, Street Fighter V, that was the big one on ESPN. And, yeah, we can show a little bit of video here of the end. And the number one player in the world, Korea's Infiltration, took it, as a lot of people predicted. However, he, too, made a loser's run bracket, having to beat Fudo from Japan twice in the grand finals to take his second Evo Street Fighter title. And a big thing going on in the ESPN broadcast was the lone USA representative in the top eight, Long Island Joe, was really hype, and they were showing his dad, who flew in from Long Island, and just great broadcast by ESPN too. Mike Ross, Seth Killian, and Gutex, they did a great job. The Pog champ himself, Gutex, on Twitch, and also shout out, speaking of wrestling, Dre, to good old JR, Jim Ross, who is live tweeting it and got really hyped for it. Oh, here's Infiltration right here, bowing to the crowd after his wins. So, yeah, it's always the best competitive gaming event every year. It delivered this year. So, yeah, great job for that. And I have one last shout out, which is to the Splash Brothers, actually, Clay and Steph. Let's see if I can bring this link up here. They are the big slime ballers. They went on the Kids' Choice Awards, I want to say it is, and they shot giant balls into hoops and slimed a bunch of kids. And Russell Wilson is the host here. So anyway, we won't linger too on this. We're going past, but yeah, we'll put this video up, and it was pretty entertaining. You'll get to see who won the rematch of the three-point competition between Steph and Clay here on the Kids' Choice Awards.
Absolutely.
And that's all my shout-outs.
Next year, is it just going to be, are they going to keep it just the Splash Brothers, or are they going to keep that name with Kevin Durant, or do you think they're going to come up with a new moniker for those three?
So the one thing I've heard is that the Death lineup, their small lineup, might become the Megadeth lineup. That's the new rumor, but you can't make nicknames ahead of time. You have to kind of play it out. So let's see how the season goes.
Fair enough. All right. Well, that's been our show. Right about an hour. I think we went a little long, but that's fine. If you found us not through the website, we are on boxscoregeeks.com. I've been your host, Ray Alvarez. You can find me on Twitter as Nerd Numbers. Patrick Minton, you can find on Twitter as NBA Geek. And producer Brian Foster, you can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Our show is on iTunes and Stitcher. The Boxscore Geek Show. Subscribe, upvote, helps us out. We go live every week, usually around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers. Tune in. You can catch the live show. We had so much to discuss. We didn't really reference the comment section, but thank you very much to Giano51 and Andrew Sutton in the comment section this last week. And if you missed the live show, you can catch the recaps on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.